Bonjour, this is G, and welcome to Behind the Mic Live, where I interview incredible coaches, public speakers, and authors who are making big rock star moves in their business. Today, my rock star guest is Shona Bramble. She is an author, a poet, and a speaker. And today is the launch date of her latest book, a book of poetry titled Unborn. So please welcome to Behind the Mic Live, Shona. How are you?
I'm great, G. I'm doing wonderful. Today is one of those days that's just emotional. It's a dream come true type of day. It's a stressful day because everything is sort of happening with the launch of the book, but I'm feeling real good. A little tired, but I'm good.
And you were just in Cancun over the weekend at a
Just in
wedding, right?
Cancun over
Yeah.
the weekend, where I even spat a little poetry out when I was there. Original poetry for the bride and groom. So, yeah, just got back last night, but I'm here and excited to talk about my new book. Oh my gosh, so excited to talk about it.
So who is Shona?
Ooh, you starting out with the tough questions. You know, Shona is Shona is many things. And when
Mhm.
I think about who Shona is not someone you could necessarily put into a box. And
Okay.
I think that's probably the best thing that describes Shona because I definitely have an artistic
Mhm.
streak where I can, dabble in everything from photography to public speaking, writing poetry, doing all these different things. I like to get into design and all of that, fashion and whatnot. So I'm a lot of many different things, but I'm also a very analytical person. But I
Mhm.
think I'm very driven by my creative spirit. I think
Mm.
that always kind of takes center for me. And I think that that's something I really try to stay close to because it's a thing that fuels me the most, my
Mhm.
creative side. So yeah, so I think Shona is someone who is not necessarily going to stay in a box or in a circle. She's going to jump out of that box. She's going to do things. She's going to try things. I'm a Gemini, so
Yes.
we're a
Yes.
little wild. We're very creative. So I think I'm someone who don't like to have barriers set.
Yes.
And I don't believe in people telling me, well, you can only do this or you can only do that. I'm gonna break it somehow. I'm
I
gonna break
think
it somehow.
as a fellow Gemini, I think that's a quality too. It's like, they say, well, you can't do it. And like, oh, I'll show you I can, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah. It's funny. Years ago, I had this friend who they gave the two of them came together, got me a gift. I think back in the day when we used to use the is it the iPod that played the music? I forget what the thing was. It was a huge
Yeah, way back in the day. Yeah.
back in the day,
Yeah.
right? And on the back of it, they put an inscription back there that said
Mm,
"Nihil obstat," which is actually Latin for "nothing hinders." And I
okay.
said, "Where did you guys pull this phrase from?" They're like, "Shona, because that's you. Nothing hinders you. You're gonna always do what your spirit moves you to do, and even though it's challenging, you're gonna do it." So I thought that was really interesting that they put that phrase, "Nihil obstat." That was really really cool, and I've always remembered that. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
So how did you find your voice?
It's I think so. Just to start, I've always had the voice, right? Growing up in the
Okay.
Caribbean, I started writing when I was probably about 8 years old. I wrote my first little ditty, a little song that I wrote that my family still remembers the lyrics for it and the tune. And being in church, in the choir, and
Mhm.
having to do certain things, I kind of found my voice there.
Mhm.
But at school, I dabbled a little bit in poetry and a little bit of writing. And then that poetry and writing continued when I moved to the US. So I was
Mhm.
always involved with literary magazines. I was always doing something creative with my writing and stuff
Mhm.
like that. So I always really had my voice. I would recite at special events and even at family weddings, I would do poetry and things like that. So I always really had that voice. But I think that voice came from just being in the church and being able to sing and do recitations
Yeah.
at harvest time and stuff like that. So the voice kind of started there. Um, and so when I moved to the US, my creativity, my poetry was really, my teachers really took a note of that, especially in high school, where I went to high school in Maryland. Teachers
Mhm.
really took a note of it, I think even more than I did, and took an interest. And so I was like, okay, but it was their support. of me.
Hmm.
That really made me feel like, you know what? This is something I can really pursue, even if it's on the side. And so I think that because the way in which my writing happens, especially my poetry, I
Hmm.
always felt like I had something to say. There was a storytelling element to, the writing that I did. And I think that kind of came from my great grandmother, who I mentioned in the book a little bit in the
Yes.
preface, that she, who we grew up in the same household when I was younger. It was the whole
Hmm.
extended family. And she was a storyteller of the family. She told of all this folklore and old stories and things like that. And I think seeing her just use her voice to
Hmm.
tell these stories, whether they were true or fable or whatever, she always used her voice, right? And we listened and we were intrigued. Sometimes we were scared because she told these stories sometimes, like scaring her grandchildren and great grandchildren. But I think I got my voice, really from my formative years spent in St. Vincent and having
Yeah.
strong women who use their voice.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that came from. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have so many great qualities: author, poet, public speaker, creative storyteller. What would you say is your number one rock star quality?
Gosh, I will honestly have to say poetry.
Poetry. Okay.
Yeah, I think because I mean, public speaking is a close. I mean, I think they're kind of neck and neck because I love
Right.
to do public
One
speaking.
is written, one is spoken. So it's like,
Right,
yeah, sharing
right.
stories.
I love the process of writing speeches
Mm-hmm.
and in connecting the speeches and seeing how the speeches can connect to the audience and what can they take away from it, things like that. So I really love that process. But I think with poetry, because poetry comes so naturally and it's so fluid when it comes into me because I think of myself as not necessarily that I write poetry, that poetry writes me.
Right.
I
Emotional.
see it that way. So it's kind of like a very holistic feeling, a very
Hmm.
natural, like honest to good feeling when a
Hmm.
poem comes to me. And these poems come to me through dreams, sometimes just observing things in the atmosphere,
Nice.
or I might hear something, I might see something, and the words just flow and it's natural, it's not forced. So I
Yeah.
don't tell myself to go sit down and, oh, I'm going to write a poem about this, that, the other. Nah, it just comes randomly out of nowhere. But the way the words connect, whether it's a free verse or something that rhymes,
Hmm.
so natural
Yeah.
and it's so powerful. And sometimes a little scary because I'm just like, I don't know where these words are coming from, but they're coming. And there's a tempo and there's a feel. And
Yeah.
so
Writing
there's
a
something,
song.
something very organic about that I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, poetry would probably be the number one thing that I think of all the talents and gifts that I've been
Yeah.
given in this life that I think I really I'm most connected to.
Yeah, so I had a show back a couple years ago called G's Backstage Pass. You
Yes.
were the first guest on that show.
Yeah.
And then Sandy had a Soleil retreat over in
Yes.
France when we were over there on the French Riviera.
Yes.
And you came over and presented an amazing workshop
Hmm.
and also got me this hat. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
I
I'm
remember
rocking the hat,
that.
rocking the fedora. Yeah. I wore this all over the French Riviera, and everyone's like, "Wow, he looks French," and I can't speak any French.
Oh my
But
gosh.
um, and it was at that workshop that Sandy, who you guys have been friends before I was even in the
Oh my
picture, you've known her
God.
for a long time, was
Hmm.
really inspired by your workshop, and she
Hmm.
created her book of poetry. I want to know, what was it like speaking over there, at Soleil Retreat,
Hmm.
and how did that embrace any of the creativity of where you are today?
Wow. That was an experience and a half, this retreat, speaking to mostly an audience of women. Um, speaking of finding your voice, there was a period of time where I had lost my voice, not
Hmm.
necessarily, not in a practical sense, but I think
Hmm.
somehow for a number of years, in maybe the late '90s to maybe early to mid 2000s, I didn't recite poetry in public. I didn't really write very much, and um, so I felt for a while that my voice was gone. And
Wow.
so between 2016, 2018 is when I started to find my voice again in poetry, started
Hmm.
writing more and just started to put everything down in a notes page in my phone. So when time came for me to go to Nice last year, and I
Mm-hmm.
came and I was there with that audience, and the poem that I did was "If You Believe," which was
Yes.
really a poem about women's empowerment. And
Yes.
I actually wrote that for a women's summit back in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
There was something so wonderful to be able to be in that audience and read that poem, and I get overcome when I read that poem because it has all the elements of who we are and how we should see ourselves as women, as girls, right? And so there's a certain bit of emotional, like, I don't know what to call it, like this thing that happens when I truly connect to a poem. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I see that the audience members are connecting to it equally, I could see it, I can feel
Yes.
it,
Yes.
So that was a powerful statement because after it was over, I remember several of the women said to me, they're like, I don't think I ever had the permission to do certain things.
Wow.
Even just getting up to the stage and doing certain things I was asking them to do. Some were shy at first and they were like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. And then I was just like, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to just give it a try. And then
Yes.
we did. And then I saw where we ourselves as women sometimes we kind of don't think, or we're fearful that, people might not think that we're doing it the right way or we're being perfect. Da, da, da. Just give ourselves the ability and
Yes.
the permission to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so that's what that poem was all about. And that's what that workshop was all about. It was like, what's holding you back from
Yeah.
getting to your dreams. And I think a lot of people, if not all people, connect to that. There's
Yes.
always something that holds us back. But once you can break through it and see what it is, because I saw some emotions there. I
Mm-hmm.
saw I saw a couple of women crying, like tears and talking about what's holding them back. And then they have the realization that, oh my God, I'm the one holding me back. I
Right.
can't put this on anybody else.
Right.
So to be able to write poetry that inspires, that empowers, that make people feel good and positive, that was beautiful. And so to be able to do that in a different country last year, man, that was icing on the cake. That was so beautiful, and it was so well received.
Yeah, it was amazing because you really inspired Sandy because I remember she got up and said
Yeah.
that she was going to have a book out by the end of the
Hmm.
year,
Hmm.
and that was in
Hmm.
October
Yeah.
of last year, and by December, end of
Yeah.
December, she
Yeah.
launched her book, and it
Yeah.
just really, yeah, this is when with the energy,
Yeah.
we got the two Geminis, you and I, and then the Virgo energy together. It's
Yes.
so
Yes.
creative,
Yeah.
and that was just such an incredible workshop.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I mean it really gave me more direction too of what I
Yeah.
want to do with my coaching.
Yeah,
And it's like,
and funny enough, G, not to cut you off, I
yeah, yeah,
remember the night before I left Nice when I was having dinner with you guys. I remember
yes,
us having the conversation about the book. And I remember, just holding her hand and I see it in her face. She's like, my mother would be so proud if I were to get this accomplished. And I
yeah,
remember saying to her, you've
yeah,
got this. You've got this.
yeah,
And that was a seriously emotional moment.
yeah,
I
it
think
was,
that was the moment that it went off for her that, you know what? I can do this. And
yep,
I saw that let's go attitude in her that, you know what, I'm going to take and just go and do this thing. And she did it. So when she sent me the notification that she was about to publish this book, my heart was just so filled with joy. And what was also beautiful for the men that were there in that audience too, I
yep,
saw their reaction. I got their feedback that the way they
mm-hmm,
were feeling, about everything that was being done and said there. But I think that, you know, to for women to inspire other women, it's sometimes a very difficult thing. But for me, it's something that I feel that comes so natural to me, and I want to share that as much as I can, and I want to give that to others so that they can take it to the next and to the next and to the next. Just yeah, yeah.
so let's talk about your poetry book Unborn. Where
Hmm.
did the inspiration come from, and then what was the time or the fork in the road or something where you finally said, okay, I've got everything I want, now it's time to publish and release.
Hmm. Yeah, well, as I was saying before, I started writing a very long time ago. A lot of my earlier poems were published here and there in little literary magazines over the years, whether it was in high school or in college and things like that. And then, there was that period of time, sort of like when I went through this drought, where I didn't write that much or recite that much. And it
Mm-hmm.
was around 2016. It was right after the murder of George Floyd.
Oh, no.
I was sitting there and I was trying to really take this in, what was happening in our
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
And I said, gosh, if I were to have a child, be it a son, what would I tell this child about what this world has to offer? As a Black woman, what would I tell my young Black son? And
Wow.
so this idea came to me to write a letter to my unborn child. So the title of my book is Unborn.
Oh, wow.
And that was the poem that started it all. So I sat down and I penned this letter, and the words just sort of came. It was though I was writing to my unborn sort of son, and I'm sort of telling him in some ways what to expect in the good and the bad of what
Oh,
this life
wow.
has to offer to him. And there's no name attached to the person in this
Mm.
poem. And so I wrote this poem and I had it and I was overwhelmed even after I read it. And I said, wow, this is bringing on some kind of feelings that I'm not understanding here, you
Yeah.
know. And I read it to a friend a few weeks later, a male friend, and he sat there and he looked at me and he said, Shona, this is something else. I mean, he was completely overwhelmed. And I said, okay.
Mm.
I said, there's something about this.
Yeah.
And I continued to share it with some other people. I remember
Mm-hmm.
going to a meeting for some sort of meeting I went to, and I did it as part of a speech, that poem. And
Mm-hmm.
after the meeting was over, I was trying to get feedback from other folks as to not so much for the speech itself, but for the poem itself,
Right.
what they
Right.
thought about it. And there was a wonderful conversation that ensued at that moment. Um, they started to say to me, and one person said specifically, she said, you know, Shona, I know that you wrote this poem for your unborn child, your unborn son. But to me, the word unborn has so many meanings. It's about unborn dreams, unborn
Beautiful.
desires. And I'm getting so emotional talking
Oh,
about this.
wow. Wow.
Unborn
Wow.
goals. And I'm
Yes.
sitting there going, what? Like
Hmm.
that didn't even tap into me when I was writing this
Hmm.
specific poem for this specific reason. But for them to tell me that it meant all these different things to them within the context, I was just like blown away. And I remember walking away from that place that night and I said, okay, um, I need to work on my poetry. I need to
Yeah.
continue writing. And I kept writing and I kept writing, and it was like it
Wow.
was nonstop. And so when I was thinking about what would I call this book, I said, it has to be Unborn. It has to be
Wow.
Unborn. I had the imagery in my head in terms of what would be on the cover, and worked with a great friend who's a graphic designer.
Mm-hmm.
He said,
Mm-hmm.
this is what I'm thinking in terms of what I want for the cover. And he took it to the next level. And
Yeah.
so even the cover has a story. Do you want me to get into that? I can tell
Yes.
you.
Yeah.
So,
What's the story of the
so,
cover?
so on the cover, I wanted him to, put at the top of the page Unborn. And then
Mm-hmm.
I wanted him to have like some dots, and, you'll see when you go and order it online, you'll see the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the bottom, it has like a huge butterfly, but I wanted it to be more like a
Yes.
graphic black and white butterfly. And I only wanted the book to be in black and white.
Yes.
And so when he did that initially, I was like, this is great. And he said, no, I'm going to do something else. He used the O, and I have the book here. I don't know if you can
Yes.
see
Yes.
this.
That's it. Yes.
This is the
Yes.
proof copy. And
Yes.
when you look at the cover, when you can actually see it, what he said he was going to do, the O in the word unborn, he's going to almost make it seem as though it's a womb, like the womb of a woman, right?
Wow. Oh,
So when
wow.
you see the O, it's almost as though the dots are coming from that womb, and then at the bottom you see the butterfly.
Oh,
So
wow.
there's something symbolic even about that. And I remember just when I saw the finished product, the cover, I was overcome. I was just like, wow, this
Wow.
captures everything I was thinking about. I wanted a simple design. I wanted it to be a powerful design. and it did that. You know,
Hmm.
the title of the book being Unborn, the main poem being that, you know, that poem Unborn. And
Yeah.
so it all came together and it felt very real to me. And so I started putting the poems together. And by the time I was done with all the poems that I had, probably had close to 100 poems.
100 poems?
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah. And
God.
I started putting them in,
Wow.
they seemed to be in categories, and some
Okay.
were
Okay.
about mind and spirit, some were about complicated relationships, some were about, um, you know, roots of inspiration. So I've got 10 sections in there that each of them tackles something about the human, you know, spirit in
Yeah.
some way. And I started to put it together. But gee, it sat on my phone and on my computer for a couple of more years since
Years.
2016.
It
It's
sat on
years.
in years. Wow. Wow.
Well,
Okay.
it sat on my phone in a notes page. And then finally I said, you know, I need to have someone edit this.
Yeah.
One of my
Yeah.
friends is an incredible editor. I decided to ask him to edit it for me, and he did. And so he did that. And again, it sat for a couple more years. So since 2016 to
Oh
about
wow.
2024, this thing
Oh
was
wow.
sitting edited with a cover and everything, but not complete. It was somewhere in between, but not finished. And it wasn't until, I would say, about 4 weeks ago,
Okay.
I told myself, I said, you know what? I've got this thing that's unfinished,
Yes.
that's on board,
Yes.
that needs to be done.
Yes.
And you know, when you're a writer, when you're a poet, when you're in the space that I'm in, there's so much fear about sharing your work sometimes because you don't know how people are going to take it, how they're going to respond. And so I think a part of that was me being fearful about people
Okay.
seeing who I am within these pages and how I
Yeah.
see the world. But then I said, no, I'm going to finish it anyway. So I decided one day to do 2 hours, and before you know it, it turned into 6 hours. And I was up till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. But I was
Yes.
energized. I was
Yes.
so energized. I
Yes.
was like, this is fantastic. And the next day I did a couple more hours, and I just kept going and just kept going. And then I said, wait, I have to format this. I could format it myself, but I hired someone to do that as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
the pieces started to come together. And once
Yes.
I started to see them coming together, I said, that's it. I started to write the preface, acknowledgments. And when I knew it was ready to go, was when I read myself after I wrote my dedication, my acknowledgments, after I read them,
Mm-hmm.
tears started to flow down my cheeks. I'm
Oh
not
wow.
kidding you. I'm an emotional person, but
Wow.
I was so overcome. I was in tears. I was bawling like a child. I was like, what is this? But
Wow.
there weren't tears of sadness, there were tears
Right.
of joy. There were tears of like, you've accomplished this thing that you've wanted to do, that you put off for so many years. This was a dream deferred, and you're
Wow.
doing it. And whether you sell 10 or 15 or 100 or 1,000 books, you've succeeded in this
Yes.
thing you wanted to get accomplished, right? And when I finished those pieces together, I self published. So I went onto Amazon,
Yep.
put
Yep.
all the parts and parcels together, you know, had some little, you know, challenges here and there at the end of it,
Okay.
but I kept pushing through. I'm like, no, this is going to get done. I set a timeline as to when I wanted to have it, you know, launch, when it would be on Amazon, things like that. And day by day, I just did a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And with all the fear bubbling up in my stomach, I said, this is going to happen. This is going to be birth. And so that's
Yeah.
really the story of it. It was just one of those things where, you know, I shelved it, but it couldn't stay shelved.
Right.
You know, I think of it as like my talent of writing and poetry. No matter how much I try to get away from that, sometimes I think,
Right.
or you know, hide from it, it finds me. It
Right.
finds me.
Right.
So that's where we are, and that's how it came to be. So it is actually about 8 years in the making.
Oh wow. Wow.
Yeah, 8 years in the
Wow.
making.
Wow.
Yeah.
And see, and this is one of the benefits too of self-publishing, because
Hmm.
when you're ready to hit the button and release it, you can release it. So
Yeah.
what tips do you have for authors out there that may be publishing, self-publishing their first book, or
Hmm.
maybe they were with a publisher before and now they're about to launch their book on their own as self-publishing? What
Yeah.
advice do you have for them?
I think the advice is to really trust in your own work, trust in your abilities, trust in your talent, trust in the story that you have to tell. But more than that, make sure that you do all the necessary things like, get someone to edit your work. You
Hmm.
can't edit your own work because it's going to be very difficult to do that
Right.
because you need a second set of eyes to look at that. So I do invest in having someone edit my work, even though poetry is very difficult because one thing I did tell my editor, I said, this is more about the grammar part of it, not about the way stuff is structured, because poetry is very different in the way it's created, the way it's written, and I do
Right.
take poetic license, to do my poetry. So I think it's important to make sure that you have the list of steps of things that you need to do.
Right.
Editing your work, whether it's working on your cover design, making sure that you know when you're going to distribute it, have a timeline for things
Yes.
so you know how to and start to like in as much advance as you can start to let people know about your product, about your thing that you're trying to do. And and even though it gets scary sometimes and you feel that doubt come over you, push
Right.
through,
Push
push
through.
through and
Yeah.
think about how you got there in the first place. There's some satisfaction for me knowing that I self-published because I own the copyright. I get to really manage this in the way that I want to manage it.
Yes.
Maybe for future books, I'll go to some other publishers to see if they can do those. But I think it was important for me to do the poetry book my way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I poetry is very subjective,
Hmm.
but this is such a personal project. It's a personal project, but I think it can affect people in so many different ways that I wanted it to really tell my story the way I wanted to tell this story. So I would say to them, have a list of things that you need to know that you have to get done.
Yes.
Set expectations that are realistic. Make sure you get your work edited. Make sure you get information out there early, and just make sure that you do these things. More or less have a checklist of what you want to get done, and trust in
Right.
your work. Trust that your work is something that you're ready to share. And yeah. So that would be my
Yeah.
tip to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And take action. Don't let the imposter syndrome or the
Let me tell
uh,
you.
right.
Oh,
Tell me. Tell
I
us.
literally just got off the phone with someone. We were having a discussion around that because when I told them that I finished the book in the past few weeks, they were just like, wait a minute, when exactly did you get that done? But I told them how long it took me to get here. And they're like, well,
Yes.
Shona, the important thing is that you got it done. I said, yeah, but sometimes, we hold ourselves back. So many
Right.
things will get in the way. And sometimes we put things in the way. And
Right.
sometimes we as humans, we're not so much so, scared of failure. We're also scared of success.
Yes.
That's something I learned a long time ago. It's not so much that we are scared of failure, we're scared of the possible success as well. Because
Yeah.
then how do we follow that up? You know? So it's one of those things where you just have to execute. You have to execute. And if it doesn't feel right, you stop and then you go back to it. Because there were a couple of poems where I was going a certain direction with them, and then I got close to the end and I said, do I want this to end this way? No, I can switch it
Mm.
up. I
Yes.
have the right to do that. I'm the poet. I'm the
Yes.
person who's
Yes.
creating this. And so, yeah. And then there were some that I decided, should I scrap this? I don't know if I necessarily want to put this in there. And I say, no, I should put it in there. I should put it in there. Yeah, because it might touch somebody in a different way. So, it's one of those things where, yeah, you just don't know. You just have to do. You just
Yeah.
have to do. Yeah.
And over the 8 years, you had over 100 poems.
And that's just over the
Yeah.
8 years. So the selection that's in this book
Yes.
is only from a period of time between 2016 and 2018. I
Okay.
might have thrown in a couple of new ones, but my
Okay.
work from before 2016, none of that has ever been published except for small literary magazines. So I probably have enough for another
You have
book.
more books. You
The
have more books.
previous, yeah, before 2016 poetry is another book.
Yeah.
And in the process of writing this one, I had enough information and I had enough stuff in my head that I wanted to
Right.
talk about and write about, that I also have enough information to go into a third book. So it's all there. It's all been there. It's all been there with me. It's just a matter of me saying, okay, I need to explore this. I need to
Yes.
see where this goes. Because sometimes all I have is a title. That's all
Okay.
I have sometimes in my head is a title. Or I might have a vision of something. I might dream about
Mhm.
something and I say, and I'll write the dream down if I remember it well enough. And
Yep.
I'll say, what is this dream trying to tell me? And I'll try to see if I can put whatever images down and see how that connects somehow, But I don't waste anything. I take
Right.
on my thoughts and I put them down. And one day I might have 4 lines, but the next day I might add 4 more lines to it. So the process sometimes is very choppy. It doesn't always
Yes.
flow all at once.
Yes.
Yeah,
This is what it's like with the songwriters too, for the
really.
musicians. Spent
Yeah,
25 years with musicians. I've been in the
yeah.
room when they're writing songs, and sometimes they'll just have a chorus
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have any verse with it, or they just have a verse. Or sometimes I've seen it in pre-production rehearsals. The
Mm-hmm.
guitarist just starts playing something, the drummer plays, the bass plays, and the singer just starts going no 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 no, and then comes up with something, and then 6 months later it's a record, it's a hit record, and it's like it
Oh
just came
my
from.
God.
So I think it's really important
Whew.
for, like what you're doing is just to embrace your creativity,
Mm-hmm.
have that notes app, have that voice app, even if
Mm-hmm.
it's like as you get inspired
Mm-hmm.
with creative thought, to just write it down, capture it, put it into Google Docs or something, and
Yes.
hang on to it. So,
Yeah.
yeah, now I want to talk to you about who is your favorite rock star.
Whew. That's always a tough question, G.
I asked it last time too, a couple of years ago. Yeah,
Yeah, you did. And,
yeah.
in terms of rock star in the musical sense,
Okay.
I think I
Or
might have mentioned
influence.
Freddie
Influence.
Mercury. Freddie Mercury and Tina Turner definitely are
Oh,
two of my
Tina.
top
Yes.
rock stars, right?
Yes.
In that world. I think in terms of like poetry, because even though he's a singer, Kendrick Lamar is an
Oh,
African
yes.
American.
He's a poet. Yeah, he's
He's a poet,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
I absolutely there's something about his music, about his lyrics that really
Yes.
moves me. I really love to listen to him.
Yes.
And so I think it's really hard to pick just one person because I think that musically or whether it's poetry, I go off of energy and it's the way I
Right.
feel. Like Tina Turner when she sings, there's an
Right.
energy I get from her, right? And
Yes.
um, Freddie Mercury had one of the strongest and most amazing ranges when it comes to music. And
Yes.
I've done some research on him, but just I used to use his song when I used to do a lot of public speaking contests. I used to use his songs as my fight song or like my inspirational song.
Yes. To get
And
into
it was
the
like always
mindset.
Freddie. Show
Yes.
must go on was one of them. I used to
Yes.
always play in
Oh,
my
that's
car before I go to compete. But so
yes.
Friday's definitely up there as one of those
Yeah.
rock stars that just kind of, when I hear him, when I see him, he's so much about he's such a performer,
Yeah.
and you feel his music, you feel his words, and there's something really explosive about him that I've always admired.
Yeah.
Always admired. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because think about it, songwriting and poetry and public speaking and everything is writing
Mhm.
stories, sharing
Yeah,
stories,
yeah.
and just embracing your creativity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
Woo.
this is great. This is so much fun. I was like,
Yes.
when you said that it was being released on the 30th, I'm like, okay, we'll do a special behind the mic today. Today
Yeah,
is the release
yeah,
day. I want
yeah.
everyone. How can people get in touch with you? How can people work with you? Say they want to book you for a workshop. What's the best
Mhm.
way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and by the way, do we have time for me to maybe recite one or two
Sure, absolutely. Yo,
pieces?
sure,
Okay.
sure, sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
to
we
get in
got
touch
time.
with me right now, I am on Instagram as Bram Show. That's B as in boy,
Mm-hmm.
RAMSHO.
Mm-hmm.
I also am on TikTok as
Oh
Bram
my
Show
God.
as well.
Yes, you've got to follow her on TikTok. Yes. Continue. Yes,
Yes,
yes.
same handle, BRAMSHO. And I've got a bunch of stuff now promoting the book on TikTok.
Yep.
I'm also on Twitter, X as Bram Show as well. So
Yep.
you can definitely DM me at any of those. If I'm personally connected to you on Facebook, then you can reach me through Facebook. But I'm working on a website that will have all my creative stuff on there. I hope to have that within the next few weeks.
Cool.
So that I can have all my creative stuff in one place. So
Yep.
that's to come. But right now, definitely check out my handles. Bram Show, B as in boy, RAM as in money, SHO. That's where
That's
you can find
money. I
me.
love that.
And
Yes.
I'm so excited about this. My book can be found both as a print publication and an
Mm-hmm.
ebook on
Yes.
Amazon. So you
Yes.
type in Unborn, Shona Bramble, and it'll pop right up.
Yeah.
But I'm super excited to have people read this and see it. Like I said earlier, there are 10 sections. So there's something to pick from
Yes.
that you
Let's
can
let's
get
hear it.
into.
Let's hear some. Let's hear
So,
some. Okay.
so just to kind of give you some quick highlights. So the
Mm-hmm.
first section is called Planted of Seeds. The second one is Home Rediscovered, and that's a lot about my Caribbean upbringing, and it's
Yes.
going to be a lot of stuff about St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which is where I'm from in the Eastern
Yep.
Caribbean. The next section is called Likes and Desires.
Mm-hmm.
Take what you wish from that. The next section is Mind and Spirit. The next section is Life and Times, People and Other Beings. I get creative with the
Yes.
titles.
Yes.
Roots of Inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
Nature of Dreams. I had to have something about dreams in there. And
Absolutely.
then there's a section called Love of One. And then the final section or chapter is called Sowing of Seeds. So
Yes.
it follows a pattern, and you all recognize a pattern when you get into it. But there's one particular, well, maybe a couple of poems I'd like to quickly
Okay.
um, share with you. And maybe I should, let's see. Ooh, I'm getting emotional just even.
This is good. Okay. Yeah. 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 Take your time. Take your time.
um, let's see. This is alrighty. Page 84. It's nice that I have numbers that I can go back. Yeah. So this one is called This Is Our Time.
Okay.
This is our time to listen to our voice, to stop being scared of not being heard, of not knowing it all or having it all, to knowing we are not perfect, but perfectly chosen to take the reign. This is our time to acknowledge the past, but not to let it hinder our future, to not let it create confusion of what we bring to the table, of how we fit in the seat with no labels. This is our time to silence the noise, to
Hmm.
discern what's for you and what's right, of meeting our hearts and trusting our spirits that we have done the work. This, that we have suffered disappointments and we have experienced great loss, but we will skillfully soothe the ones who hurt. This is our time to believe in our nature, accept the individual that was nurtured into the
Hmm.
person who we are now. With confidence and grace, intelligence and brains, we will fight for equality. We will fight for integrity. We will
Hmm.
fight for a way forward, for humanity to find joy. We will brace for the adversary and focus on possibility in knowing that here and now, this is our time.
Wow.
So that's
Wow.
one of them. And
Yes.
I want to share with our
Okay.
audience
Okay.
the one that really got this all started,
Yes.
the one that I mentioned earlier. Let me make
Yes.
sure I'm at the right page here. I got to go to my table of contents. I should have marked these, right? That's okay.
That's okay.
I'm tired. I can use that. That's my reason. All right. So I'm going to read to you Unborn. Let me make
Yes.
sure that I can.
Yes.
Whew. All right. Let me make sure that I can find it here. Sorry about that, page 54. And again, this is the one that started everything.
Wow.
The one that I was writing to my unborn son. I don't know you yet, nor do I know your name. Yet I know that others will label you. I have not yet suffered the pain that brings you to life. yet I already feel the pain of not seeing you walk through my door. How could I contemplate doing everyday things with you when every day I will worry about you? How could I dream the dream that many have, only to be unsure of your time here? How do I not allow myself to bring you, to have you, to call you my own, my unborn?
Hmm.
I don't know who you will look like, nor do I know how wide your smile will be. Yet I know that others will vilify you for being. I have not yet suffered the pain that others have long suffered, yet I already feel the pain of not seeing you, hearing you call me on the phone. How could I contemplate taking your hand when every day I will worry about whose hands will wash over you? How could I dream the dream that many have, only to be unsure of your time here? How do I not allow myself to bring you, to have you, to call you my own, my unborn? I don't know what challenges you will take on in life, nor do I know how incredible your talents will be. Yet I know that others will seek you out just because you're you. I have not yet suffered the joy that others have long felt, yet I already feel like that joy will be short lived. How could I contemplate standing at your side when you accomplish your every dream, when every day I will worry about whose nightmare you will be? How could I dream the dream that many have, only to be unsure of your time here? How do I not allow myself to bring you, to have you, to call you my own, my unborn? I do know that I will love you, my unborn. I do know that love will not save you, or maybe it will. I do know that I will cherish your every moment, your every tear, your every laugh. I do know that the world will be better with you because you are its own. But I do fear that you will be rejected and disrespected because of who you belong to.
Hmm.
How do I tell you that I already love you? But my tears will be felt by your heart as you lie within me.
Oh, wow.
How do I not allow myself to bring you, to have you, to call you my own, my unborn? Mm,
Oh, wow. 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 Everybody go on Amazon and and get unborn and get some tissues because it's
yeah.
wow. That's very emotional. This is incredible. Well, thank you again
Oh
for
my
being on
gosh.
the show. I just think that the energy and the frequency that the three of us are on is just incredible. So
Thank
yeah,
you so much. And this has been such an honor, G, and such a pleasure for me to be here.
thank you.
This is one of these poems when I do it, I get so emotional, I get overcome. And I know that as someone that doesn't have a child,
Hmm.
I do see what it's like for a lot of people in difficult situations and difficult circumstances, how they try to thrive in this world. And so, this book is going to inspire you regardless of who you belong to and who you are.
Yeah.
And it's about inspiring others. And my poetry is meant to inspire, or it's meant to have people see um, a bit of my world the way I see it. There's a part of that. But I hope that somebody is able to pull something from one
Yeah.
or two of my pieces and say, you know
Yeah.
what, I can relate to this. I understand this. I get this.
Yeah.
So I thank you for the opportunity to come here. This is my first interview since the book launched this morning at 12,
Yes.
12
Yes.
a.m. this morning on Amazon. So thank you so much. I hope your audience does go out and get it and appreciate it for everything that it is. It is something that it's a dream come true. It's an unborn dream, it's an unborn
Mm.
desire, and I get to share that with the world. So I thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Shona. You are a true rock star. Until next time, everyone. Ciao.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
See
Ciao.
ya. Cheers.
Take care. Bye bye.